Good morning. Welcome to Houston Oasis. I am your MC, Jacob Atchison. I apologize. So we sent out a survey for me never be the MC again, but no one filled it out. You got to vote, people. So we are a secular alternative to faith-based communities. We have our core values over here. The one I'm choosing to highlight today is reality is known through reason. There's a very personal reason, very recent, as to why I'm choosing that today. Some of y'all know it. So Dr. Ray is an American organizational psychologist and author who focuses on the psychological difficulties of life outside religion. How does a person navigate in the real world if they were homeschooled in a fundamental religion? What does a young couple do when faced with religious parents wanting to indoctrinate their child? These are just some of the real-life issues that Dr. Ray has addressed. His books include Sex and God and the God Virus. So without further ado, Dr. Ray.
Thanks. It is great to be back in Houston. I think it was pre-COVID when I was here last, so always fun to talk to Oasis folks. And I bring greetings from Kansas City, Oasis, where I'm happy to announce that some poor Methodist church lost their building and we got it. So we are now... I am so proud of Kansas City Oasis because we've survived COVID for one, but second, we've been saving our money up, we've been working hard, and for the last 2 weeks, we've had teams of people in 3 or 4 nights and days a week just dealing with, rebuilding this building for our own purposes. But it's fun to have our own place. We have literally been kicked out of 4 different venues, 2 of which we were kicked out because of who we were. The long story I won't go into. So it's nice to not be able to be kicked out anymore. I think you guys have had the same experience or similar experience. Okay, well today we're going to talk about 2 things. Mainly I'm here to raise awareness for recovering from religion and what our service is and who we are. And second, to talk about religious recovery. And this thing's going to drive me nuts. Okay, that's better. A religious recovery. So hopefully we'll be able to accomplish both of those things in the time that I have. So losing God really can hurt people. I've heard this thousands of times in my career. I used to pray every day. Now what do? I don't have anybody. I don't have my best friend anymore. I feel like I lost my... And for those of us, or those of you, I was raised religious. For those of you who are never raised religious, this makes no sense. But for those who went through religion, you know what I'm talking about. You lose something, and it may have been a fantasy, it may have been imaginary, but it's still a loss. So there's a lot of things that people lose in this process. And we're here, Recovering from Religion has a really enormous mission because there are 7 billion people on this planet. Most of them were forced into a religion, indoctrinated or otherwise coerced into some religion without their choice. And when they wake up and they decide they have been fooled and they don't want to be in that religion anymore, they have nowhere to go. And it's worse in some areas than other areas. I mean, think about a Mormon college student in Utah. Where do they go? Everybody. With examples that we literally see and talk to almost on a daily basis. So we were established in 2009. Excuse me. At this moment, we have about 300 volunteers, literally around the globe. We cover 19 time zones. I'll speak about the Secular Therapy Project a little bit more later, but we have over 721 registered psychotherapists who are guaranteed to be evidence-based and non-religious in their practice. And we have almost 32,000 people who have looked for a therapist through us. So this is all growth we've seen since we started in 2009. Here's a map. The red are basically where our leadership lives. And we have leadership literally all over the globe. One of them standing right here, Rachel. You're going to hear a little bit from her a little bit later. But we have leaders from Australia to Oregon, and then we have volunteers. This is just a tiny sample of the volunteers. I put just a sample of where they're from. But one of the interesting things is we have a volunteer right here from Syria. This person lives in Syria, right in the middle of the civil war, and he's one of our most active volunteers. I don't know how he does it. I don't. But he does a great job for us. We just certified our first volunteer last week from India, which is thrilling because there's a lot of religious people in India. And by the way, there's a lot of people who are trying to leave Hinduism and Islam. And there's 1,000 different religions inside of India, most of which are dying, of course. But we're here to help those people. And we have a volunteer from Romania, his goal in life is to speak to Romanians leaving religion practically, and he actually gets some people calling in, and then he can talk to them in Romanian, which thrills him and makes everybody happy. We're all thrilled when Gabriel gets to talk to a Romanian. But he's a very active volunteer. He probably takes at least a dozen chats and phone calls every week. And we have a volunteer in Moscow who literally went out on the streets to protest the war on February 25th last year and nearly got arrested. Fortunately got back to her house before the police caught her, and she's been able to stay low. But she is daily one of our volunteers. Every day I see her online working with our clients. And we have one other volunteer clear down in Melbourne, Australia. I'll talk a little bit about later. Went on a tour of Australia speaking, and I got to meet one of our most active volunteers, Daniel. And I asked Daniel, how many chats and calls have you taken in the last 3 years that you've been with us? He said, somewhere less than 2,500 phone calls and chats. That is remarkable. He said, I probably take an average of 3 to 4 chats every single day, or phone calls. He does both. Not all of our agents take both chats and phone calls, but he does. So anyway, he's just one of them. We got lots of other volunteers that take hundreds. I don't think anybody's taken 2,500 like Daniel has. You look on our chat, there's Daniel. He's always about every other chat, it seems like. So here's what people face when they leave religion. I fear I'm going to lose my husband when I tell him I no longer believe or I want to leave the church. I don't have an imaginary friend anymore to talk to. I find myself praying even though I know it's all bullshit. I mean, we get that quite a bit. I can't stop this response, a prayer response in my brain. I always feel so certain. I always felt so certain when I had a God belief. Now I just flounder with no sense of purpose. That sense of purpose is really important to a lot. I would say fully half of the people that chat in or call in. I can't get over my fear of hell. We'll talk a little bit about that later. I get so triggered when my mom says she's praying for me. Anybody else have one of those? Oh yeah. So this is not new. And I feel repulsed by my own sex, my own sexuality, my own body. That is a big component in people that chat in with us. Here's one I thought was just mind-boggling. I'm an ex-wife of a Southern Baptist minister who had over 1,500 churches in his district, and he was caught soliciting a prostitute. I'm now an atheist, and I've lost everything. He didn't lose everything. She lost everything, which is an irony in this whole religious stuff, especially on the Southern Baptist side. So what are people recovering from? They're recovering from emotional consequences of leaving religion, like abandonment. Many people lose everything when they leave their religion. It's a huge emotional turmoil because everything was all nice and set. You had a community, you had friends, you had support, emotional support, and now you don't. And that can happen literally overnight. One day to the next day. You can lose it all. a hugely disrupted worldview. We have these people come to us and say, I was homeschooled, I was taught that the earth is 10,000 years old. Now I realize evolution's probably true. Oh, crap. What am I going to do? And they're searching, they're saying, what books are in the library? How can I learn about this? And what we find in many of these people is they're stuck in their teenage years in many ways. They just are stuck because they weren't allowed to develop intellectually or sexually or socially because of their homeschooling or because of the restrictive cult-like environment they were raised in. And there's a lot of anger that comes out of the people. We get people calling into us that are just ready to jump through the phone. I'd like to kill that minister who did whatever they did. And it's just a feeling of loss. What do I do? I'm in this big world that I don't understand. I thought I understood it. It made perfect sense when I was a Jesus follower. And now that I realize he's an imaginary, I have no skills. And there is a huge skill deficit for many of these people. How do I manage my own checkbook? I mean, it can get down to that level of detail because the man's the head of the house. He did all the money. He kept all. I can't even manage my own checkbook because I wasn't allowed to do that as a Southern Baptist wife or a Jehovah's Witness wife. So there's also huge intellectual consequences, the total loss of learning opportunities. How many Jehovah's Witnesses do we hear almost daily saying, I would have gone to college except my church wouldn't let me. And then when I did go to college and they learned what I was doing, they threw me out. They shunned me. They disfellowshipped me. So there's a lot of anger as a result of being taught that here's the way the world works and then finding out, no, this is the way it really works. Big disconnect, cognitive dissonance in spades, if you will. Here's what one client, and all the quotes I'm going to show you here today come directly from clients. I didn't have to make any of this stuff up. I could have, I did find all the quotes I'm showing you here within the last 9 days, basically. I think the anger is only inevitable when you realize how many years you wasted on a lie and how profoundly misled you were. That is a big aha moment for many people. A lot of the people that come to us are experiencing some kind of depression. They are having some kind of a trauma response. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. And this disruption of reality that I mentioned before. What is reality? I now know my old system wasn't what the new system, I don't understand it at all. And we are literally helping people when they chat in and call with us, we're literally helping them get in touch with reality. And we will send them to resources. They will send them a YouTube podcast. We'll send them books. Here's the things that can help you understand the world quicker, kind of catch you up to speed. And this comes from one of our clients. Losing my perception of reality is very depressing. And it is. I would say one of the most common responses we see as a clinical psychologist is depression. Now, I can't diagnose somebody who's just chatting in with us, but I can sure look at the way they're expressing themselves and think, it looks a lot like depression. I can't get up in the morning. I've got these thoughts I can't get rid of. I can't go to work. My boss is on me because I'm not performing well. There's probably some depression going on there, and it's almost always related to their religious upbringing. There's interpersonal loss of relationships, divorce. Many people are scared of losing their children. Some churches are very good. The Mormon church and the Jehovah's Witness church are very good at stealing children. If one parent leaves the church will really support the quote faithful parent in keeping those kids. And we even have stories of Jehovah's Witness elders going to the house of a mother and middle of the night and taking her kids back to the husband with no court order. And of course, the woman is scared to death to get the courts involved because she's been taught all her life, secular world is going to kill you, or Satan's going to get in you. There's so many things that people are taught that they don't even know how to protect themselves or to keep contact with their own children. And Jehovah's Witnesses are really good at cutting you off from your children, as are the Amish. Don't let anybody tell you the Amish are a sweet and nice organization. They're as insidious as any cult on the planet. And just the way they treat children and the way they treat people who leave their religion. So this whole thing around child rearing is one of the biggest conflicts we see from people who have children. How do I raise my kids? I'm an atheist now. My spouse is still religious, and they want to keep taking the kid to church, and I don't want to be subjected to that kind of trauma-inducing teaching that is being proposed in whatever church it is, whether it be fear of hell, for example, fear of Armageddon, the last, Left Behind. How many of you watched the Left Behind series or some version of it? Okay. Do you know, we get dozens of people over a course of a year that tell us that movie traumatized me more than anything else in the church. I've had nightmares for years after seeing that movie. I'm not going to ask any more of you guys, but does it sound familiar? Yeah, it was a terrible, and there's a whole bunch of those movies. They're designed to really embed a fear response, a trauma fear response in people's brains so they won't leave their religion. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma that we see coming through. It took me a while. This is a woman talking about her own experience. She's saying, it took me a while to stop hearing my mom's voice in my head before I had religious answers rolling around in my head. I remember times of panic and terror a few times. A few times I couldn't get a hold of anyone on the phone, and I thought the rapture had happened. She's actually speaking of her experience as a child. I mean, it sounds like an adult, but she's speaking her as a child. And then she goes on to say, I think I was 14. I never want my daughter to go through that again, or go through that. So here's a mother who had this traumatic experience of being terrorized by Armageddon, fear of hell, that sort of stuff at 14. And now she got it from her parents who imposed that on her. And she's really concerned that her child not go through that same experience. I call that intergenerational trauma, or the potential for intergenerational trauma. What we've seen this is not being talked about. Part of what I'm talking about regularly now in my awareness touring lately is religious trauma and what it means. I don't have time to talk about that here today, but I will say there's a hell of a lot more going on in that area than anybody realizes. And there are so many generations who've been traumatized by the same ideology that it's not even recognizable. You don't even see, well, they behave X, Y, and Z way, but why do they behave that way? Because their father, their grandfather, their grandmother, over generations have terrorized the children and the families so that they behave in ways that are horrendous to other human beings. They shun people. They kick gay kids out of the house. Well, why do you kick your own child out of the house? It's because God told you so. Well, where'd that come from? My great-grandfather. And I can actually give that to you in my own family. My grandfather was a country church preacher for 45 years. And I know what Jesus thought of the gays. I mean, it came from God. No, it came from my grandpa. But the voice sounds similar. So how do most people recover? Well, it's not easy. For some people, it's very difficult. In those cases, they probably are experiencing a trauma response. And you don't get over trauma just by saying, get over it. That's not the way it works. And you don't get over trauma by reading books or watching some YouTubes. Those may help, but ultimately you probably need professional help. Most people go through a grief and loss process, not unlike what you'd go through if you lost a friend. A lot of people go through a grief and loss process that's very different than if you have a friend or relative that dies, you're going to go through grief and loss. That's normal. We all have understood that. You've read some of the literature, I'm sure. But what happens when your entire community dies to you, but they're still alive? That is called ambiguous grief and loss. Ambiguous grief and loss. What the hell do you do with that? That your mother-in-law could pop back in your life anytime. Your religious uncle could pop back in your life anytime and try to bring you back to Jesus. And you have left all that You lost the community, but the community is going to keep poking you. I mean, it's like taking a stick and poking you with a sharp stick every now and then. You can't really get over the grief and loss. You can't go through a process that's normal that you would go through if you had lost your parent, or a best friend or something. So there's complex stuff going on in the human experience around grief and loss with respect to leaving religion. Most people can start healing if they can find a new group like Oasis. And believe me, you've probably got people that are associated with you, maybe members here today, I don't know, that found you through us. Because we're constantly sending people to Oasis, to Fellowship with Free Thought, to the Humanist Societies, to atheist organizations. We're always pushing that information out into our clients. A lot of online resources are very good for helping healing, and so are the secular groups I've just mentioned. Last but most important is probably good therapy. And I don't mean just any old random therapist. It has to be a therapist who really understands how the brain responds to religious indoctrination. So we have a lot of evidence that a single phone call, a single chat to our organization can change people's lives. And we almost see this daily. We have a community. I won't go into lots of detail. Rachel's going to talk about it in a minute. That it's an internal community where people can only come in if they've been invited. So if somebody chats in or calls in with us and we think they can get more help by coming into our system, we will invite them in. And then we can watch. They had a single chat with us, but now they can watch, and they can belong to our ex-Mormon group, to our ex-Jehovah's Witness group. They can belong to our ex-Baptist group, ex-clergy group. We've got all these ex-groups, probably a couple dozen of them. And they can join whichever one they want, and then they can talk to other people about their experience. And that can be so healing for the people that chat in with us. So a single chat can get them the resources they need to start recovering and healing. So when there's more needed than simply chatting, our volunteers are trained very well to help connect them to a secular therapist, and we have a whole program called the Secular Therapy for that. So religious trauma is probably what we deal with the most. It's not to say that everybody who comes to us is traumatized. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a lot of people that are. There's a lot of people that come to us that are not traumatized, but they are dealing with difficult problems that are caused by religious deconstruction. And the symptoms we see when it comes to trauma is that people come to us and say, I can't go to sleep, I can't sleep properly at night, I get these fears of hell, I get this notion of Armageddon keeps coming over and over again in my brain. How do I get rid of this? People literally ask us, how do I get rid of this crazy stuff going on in my brain? And we're not psychologists. Well, I'm a psychologist, but our volunteers are not. But they're trained to listen, they're trained to reflect, they're trying to send them to the right resources, and trained to help them find a good therapist that may, if they need a therapist, might be able to go there with them. People tell us I'm always anxious. I have trouble staying focused. For whatever reason, I keep thinking about religion or Jesus or the Bible. Quotes in the Bible just pop in my head. Or here's the insidious one. I can't get the damn religious music out of my head. Somebody starts singing a song on the radio and I can't get it out. And we've all had that happen. You get a Beatles song stuck in your head for a day or two. But what if you get a religious song stuck in your head permanently? You can't get rid of it. And it leads to another religious song and another religious song. It's like there's some kind of old tape going off in your head. We get that a lot too. And of course, the main one we probably hear is, what if I'm wrong? Intrusive thoughts, the Pascal's wager, if you're familiar with that. So all those things are very common from what we have. Dr. Marlene Winnell, a friend of mine and a colleague of ours at Recovered from Religion, coined the term religious trauma. And here's what she had to say. It's time the mental health community recognize the real trauma that religion can cause. And we see it every day. She sees it every day. She's got her own practice. She's not actually a part of Recovered from Religion, but she's inspired a lot of the work that we do. In fact, if you haven't read or if you're interested in her book, you might look Leaving the Fold. That was her main book. It's an excellent book for anybody who was raised fundamentalist. So religion is giving you all sorts of messages, primarily guilt and shame messages. You're worthless, you're nothing without God, your body's the enemy. Satan can make you have these sexual thoughts. I mean, what if you're a 14-year-old kid with hormones going crazy, and which every 14-year-old kid has, and you're being told, well, that's Satan talking to you. So what you're getting is a program implanted in your brain. It's like installing a computer program in your brain that says every time you have a sexual thought, you're now going to think of Satan and evil, and you're going to start hating your body, and every time you masturbate, you're going to end up in hell. I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications for this that are now installed in the brain, and that kid is not going to be able to get rid of that very easily. And it goes on into adulthood, and then when they become involved in another relationship, they get married or whatever, that's going to disrupt their ability to have intimate relationships with a partner. This whole piece is, once you get down, you start digging below the surface and looking at how these systems work, you realize how insidious they are and how brilliant they are from a church indoctrination perspective. I mean, if you can get somebody at 12 years old to start hating their body, and the only way they can get any relief is to go back and confess to the priest or read the Bible or go to Sunday school, then you've got them for life. You have captured this person for the rest of their life. So there's 3 primary concerns. I've kind of named all of them, but I want to put them together. Probably the first thing we hear most often is fear of hell or Armageddon. I don't know. Would you say 50% have that? Second is social isolation. I lost my community. My parents won't talk to me anymore. My wife's divorcing me. There's a lot of social isolation goes on. And then when the person experiences this, it leads to depression. And then they go to a psychologist who has no clue about what all this is about. And they pour their soul out. And then the psychologist or social worker or therapist says, well, I think your depression is because you're an atheist. They literally tell people that. And that's why we have the Secular Therapy Project, which I'll talk about. No, your depression is because you lost your entire world. That would cause most people to experience depression. It's not because you're an atheist. It's not because you left your community. It's because you lost your community. There's a difference there. You made a rational choice to get out of this toxic environment we call religion. See, a third thing we get most common is sexual confusion of some kind. I've been married for 20 years, and now I think I'm gay, or I'm bisexual. I never had an opportunity in my teens to explore my sexuality. So I got married when I was 19 years old. I mean, this is what I'm not me, I'm talking about our clients here. I got married at 19 years old, and I had no clue what I was doing. We get people saying we got married, and it took us 3 years to consummate our marriage, because we have been taught purity culture and shame culture around our bodies and sexuality. 3 years to consummate the marriage. That is not uncommon for people that come out of purity culture. They're taught that, sex is the most beautiful thing, you'll have a great time, but it's kind of like, what's that Texas comedian said, what did he say? I was taught that sex is the most dirty, awful thing you can ever have, and you should save it for someone you love. That's kind of the way these people have been taught. So all three of these things are coming out of a root of abuse, misinformation, shunning, and disfellowship. And it requires quite a bit for them to get over some of this stuff. They need to identify the childhood indoctrination. They need to talk about it out loud with somebody probably. They need to identify what causing the roots of the anxiety is, probably the religion. And then many people need some kind of therapy, and they have to go to the right kind of therapy, because there's a lot of woo-woo bullshit kinds of therapy out there. And again, we'll talk about that later. There's some stages. These are stages that we see people going through all the time. It's so common that I'm going to outline it here. The first is a person has an aha moment. Oh, The Mormon church isn't true. Joseph Smith did have 38 wives. Brigham Young had 52 wives. When that comes out and they realize that's true, then their whole world gets upside down. Then they become disoriented. They become bewildered. Everything I was taught, what do I do with that information? It was wrong. And then anger and upset. We get a lot of anger coming out of people when they're going to this piece of the stage. And then the next thing is they lose everything, and extreme loneliness we've talked about. Then they go back and forth. They start bargaining with God. They start bargaining with other people. And they may have the temptation to go back to the religion. And we see that. People will leave the religion, and then they'll slip back. Or they'll go find a more liberal religion. They'll leave Catholics and then become evangelical. Or they'll leave Catholicism and become a Buddhist. We see that kind of transition. They almost never stay, but it's a transitional period related to this recovery. They will then recognize, oftentimes they recognize the trauma. Until that point in time, they're too focused on hate and anger and everybody screwed with me. And then ultimately, oh my gosh, I've been traumatized. We had a great discussion on a chat just a couple days ago. Our chat leader was able to help this person walk through their experience, and about 2/3 of the way, there's a long silence on the chat. Like 5 minutes. We thought we'd lost the chatter, and then he comes back and says, oh my God, I never realized I was traumatized. And then they start just dumping a whole bunch of crap that they hadn't told us before. But sometimes we can help people get in touch with what they've been hiding. The abuse that came from the minister, abuse that came from the Sunday school teacher, and that sort of stuff. So the last two things are they usually seek some new community, like you guys. This is therapeutic, what you're doing right here. You're bringing people together. What I saw last night was a lot of cool people having a lot of fun, and Jesus had nothing to do with it, thankfully. And then there's a lot of, this isn't linear. It kind of goes back and forth. And you'll see people going back into the angry stage and that sort of thing. But anyway, this is kind of the stages that we see a lot of. And not everybody goes through all of them in exactly this way, but it's so common. I thought I would outline them for you today. So this is the mission of Recovering from Religion, to provide hope, healing, and support for those dealing with issues of doubt and non-belief. And right now, if you would like to, I would invite you to pull your phone out and go to recoveringfromreligion.org. It's got to be org.org. And hit the chat button and just say, hi, I'm with Darrel. And see if anybody answers. I hope we've got a couple chat line agents. But if you want to do that, I'm gonna transition here and ask Rachel if she would come up and talk to us a little bit. Rachel is she's a volunteer a long time, and she's our director of support groups. And I want you to hear her story, a little bit of her story, and then also what she does. And then she's also our newest board member at Recovering from Religion. So here you go, Rachel. Does that one work?
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. Ray. He knows everything, you guys. If you have questions about the psychology of being a non-believer or of leaving religion or of purity culture, he is your guy. He knows everything there is to know. And he created this entire organization, Recovering from Religion. Really, really grateful to be a part of something that Darrel has created. All right, what am I supposed to talk about here? Let me see. Okay, so the philosophy and procedures of recovering from religion are kind of written here. We meet our clients where they are in their journey, which means that we want to ask people what they're going through and what they need from us, what they would like from us. What can we do to support you? We want to do whatever it is that you need. We offer peer support to aid our clients in their action plan. Peer support just means we're not experts. We just care, and we want to help you. We want to be there for you, and we want to help you figure out what to do next, whatever's right for you. We're not going to dictate what's right for you. We offer programs and resources to assist clients with their recovery, and that means that we have a lot of programs that we'll talk a little bit more in detail later, but we're not just a helpline. We also have a lot of other things, and resources is basically a list list of resources. We have a curated database of resources that we have found have been helpful for people, and we can send you links. And, that's kind of what we mean when we say resources. We're going to send you links to things that can be helpful for you. We extend additional support through professional services and continued interaction. So the professional services is the Secular Therapy Project, which is the sibling organization that Dr. Ray started, which is basically a list of secular therapists who have been very heavily vetted, and they promise not to make you go home and pray. They will listen to you. Most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are familiar with the religious trauma syndrome and can be helpful in getting their patients through this transition and dealing with issues that stem from religion. And continued support, again, we have some programs for continued support. Dr. Ray talked about it a little bit. We have a private online community. We have support groups. We have ways that you can continue to be supported even after your initial contact with us. We attempt to provide our services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We try real hard, y'all. We're an all-volunteer organization, but if you contact the helpline, we try very hard to have somebody there to answer. If no one is there, try again, because we have a lot of people standing by who want to help you and talk to you. We offer services 100% free of charge to our clients. Again, all volunteer. The helpline doesn't cost anything. Joining support groups doesn't cost anything. Having us send you resources doesn't cost anything. Joining our online community doesn't cost anything. Registering to learn about secular therapists doesn't cost anything. The thing that does end up costing is when you actually find a secular therapist. Unfortunately, we live in the United States and you have to pay for your therapy. But everything that we can do through Recovering Religion, we're going to do free of charge, even though some of it costs us money, which is why we need donations. We do not attempt to deconvert any from their current beliefs. The name Recovering from Religion does upset some people, and they think, that it is our goal to try to deconvert people or to take them out of religion, and that is not what we do. Although most of us are atheists and we understand the harm that religion can cause, we understand that not everyone is at the point where they want to leave religion. Some people still really rely on that social network or that faith, and if they just want to find a less abusive church or a more liberal church, or they want to find a faith community that is different for whatever reason, we want to support them in doing that. And we really do. And trust me, it can be difficult for us, so we try very hard to do that for people. We do not argue or debate theology. Sometimes we get people come onto the helpline and they want to have a debate, and we just don't do that. We'll disengage. We say that's not what we're here for. We're here to support you. If you have an issue you want to talk about, if you want to sort through what you believe and why you believe it, and maybe you want to look at some resources or you want to talk to us about how this has affected you emotionally or personally, we're happy to do that, but we're not here to have a debate. You can go on the Atheist Experience for that. They would love to talk to you. If a client is looking for religious services, we direct them to those services. I said that before. We have a list of different types of, belief systems and organizations. And if someone says, hey, I'm really interested in, secular Buddhism, we're like, great, here you go. I want to go to a more liberal church that's LGBT friendly. Great, here you go. We'll help you with that. We are not here to tell you what to believe. We want to support you in being where you feel happy and at peace, and, you have the community you want to have around you. All right, RFR programs. This is the fun part. We have so much. Before I say this, I just want to say that I had a friend who was dealing with a separate issue, not a religious issue, and went to a support group. And she said, I can go to the support group, but then there's nothing really else about this issue. And Recovering from Religion is kind of unique in that we have so many interrelated programs and supports. Almost, you can interact with us in a number of different ways, and it's an ongoing, interrelated support system. It's really beautifully put together. So our programs include the helpline or the chat line. Did anybody actually try to chat in when Dr. Ray asked you? Yeah? Did you get somebody? Yeah? So what did you do?
I just said, I'm trafficked with Darrel at Oasis. He said, tell Dr. Ray hi to Ted.
Oh, Ted, great. Yeah, did you do it?
I didn't wait for a response. I just said I was here at Oasis with Dr. Ray. Thanks for what you do.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, oh, great. So we did have volunteers online today. That's wonderful. So yeah, you can chat in 24/7. It's on our main webpage, recoveringfromreligion.org. There's a little chat button, and somebody will talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. We also do have phone calls. You can reach that from anywhere in the world. There's a phone number listed on the main webpage. If you happen to be outside of the country, there are web calls, there are calls for different countries. Anywhere in the world you can reach us as long as you've got an internet connection or a phone connection. Okay, scheduled conversations. We love this. This is kind of new. We're so happy that our tech team came up with this. If you are not able to get in touch with someone right away when you contact the helpline, or if you know there's a specific time that you want to have kind of a long conversation, you can schedule a call or a chat. There's a button on the main webpage, and you can say, hey, I can't talk now, but I really want to have a conversation with someone tomorrow at 6 p.m. or whatever. Just try to give us 24 hours notice because we're not always able to be there. But we do our best to catch those, and it's a great addition to it. Yeah? Oh, we're running out of time. I gotta go. Okay, online community. This is private. This is confidential. We use the Slack platform, but it's kind of like a Discord channel where you can join and talk to people in your specific situation. We have general channels. If you would like to be part of an online community that is private and confidential of other people that are recovering from religion, we are there for you. You just have to get an invitation. You can get that through the helpline. So where are we? RFR talks. We have these weekly. They're kind of TED-style talks. They're presented live over Zoom every Monday night, and they're also up on our YouTube channel if you want to see previous ones. These are great. Usually experts, or sometimes they're personal stories of people. These are all topics related to the recovering from religion umbrella. Podcasts. The podcast right now is a repetition of those RFRX talks. So those are the same content at the moment. Excommunications is our blog. Right now it's on Medium. Great content, personal stories, expert information, all kinds of great stuff on there. Support groups, yay! We're going to talk about that. This is my program. I am the director of the support group program. We have 63 meetup groups worldwide. Not all of them are active. Please help us. I think last month we did 32 meetings. And most of them are virtual. We have a few in person, and we would love to have in person. I do want to tell you there is a Houston meetup that meets virtually every second Sunday at noon. You are very welcome to join. You're welcome to join any of our groups. You don't have to be from the area, but the Houston area meetup is specifically the second Sunday of the month at noon, and we would really love for you to join. You can find out more information by talking to me or going onto our website. Secular Therapy Project. Again, therapists are very heavily vetted, and they definitely will understand your religious issues and they're evidence-based and properly licensed and everything in their state. Fall excursion, this is so much fun. This is like a retreat, but we don't call it that because that word can be triggering. It is a great place to get to know people from the recovering from religion community and have just a wonderful time in a beautiful area. We're at Pigeon Forge, Tennessee this year. Please come. It is so much fun. All right, moving on. We've had calls and chats from Belfast, Istanbul, Singapore, Brunswick, London, Sydney, Alberta, Latvia, Chile, and all over the United States. Every day we get calls and chats from everywhere. This is our support groups map. You can see that most of them are in the United States because that's where most of our volunteers are. But we want to fill in this entire map. We need support groups everywhere because everybody needs community. All right, moving on. Outreach. This is our first billboard. This is in Huntsville, Alabama. Really happy for that one. And I'm done. All right. Here's Dr. Ray back. Oh, he wants me to give you 30 seconds of why I volunteer. Because I'm selfish and I like attention. It's really fun. This organization is so well run and has such a beautiful community and support for the volunteers. And it's just a really fun place to spend my time. That's why I do it.
Great. Thank you. Okay. All right, well, I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to wrap this up. But I just got back from a tour of all of Australia to Height, and we as an organization, we saved for 3 years to do this. But our focus was to raise awareness of religious trauma, and it was perfectly timed because just in the last year, the Royal Commission has released 2 huge reports on child abuse in Catholic Church and child abuse and sexual abuse in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So we were coming in right following behind that. Lots of people are leaving Catholic Church. Lots of people are leaving JWs as a direct result of that report. And so we were there to kind of heighten the awareness of it there. Got to tour all of Australia. Didn't get to play tourist, though. It was exhausting. 20 days of speaking every day, practically. Now I want to talk briefly about the Secular Therapy Project. It is a project designed to help people find the right kind of therapy because there are so damn many therapists out there that are still religious. They still think prayer can heal depression or whatever. Why did they go to school if they think Jesus is the answer? Anyway, we have secular therapists all over the world. We're in nine countries now, in 45 U.S. states. In order to become a part of our system, secular therapy, you have to prove to us, to a team. We have a team of vetting team. You have to prove to us you're secular, and you have to prove to us you use evidence-based methods. We don't want any woo-woo, bullshit, religious, any of that kind of stuff. And if you can pass that, then you can get in and receive clients. Clients can find you. We do turn down about 30 to 40% of all applicants because they don't meet our criteria. They may still be a little bit too spiritual but not religious. That's always a trigger for me. Anyway, why do we need the secular therapy? Well, here's a quote from one of our clients. Someone recommended a therapist to me. First thing I saw when I entered his office was a crucifix. I panicked. I had a panic attack right there. He probably thought I was just shy or crazy, but when I tried to explain to him that the crucifix was the problem, he didn't seem to understand. I never went back to him. Well, that was a waste of their time and probably their money, and we don't like that. We think you should get good therapy the first time you walk in the door. So here's just a graph of our growth. We're now at almost 32,000 clients have found us and searched for a therapist. We're up to 721 therapists. We started with a small 24 client therapists, and now we're up to 721. If you are a therapist or you know of a therapist that you think might meet our criteria, let them know about us. We need more therapists. And by the way, Texas is the second biggest state in the nation for our therapists. We have twice, the most is California, and right behind that is Texas. So you guys are doing good, but we need more. And we're in 45 states, 9 countries, as I said earlier. We don't have enough volunteers, as Rachel said. So if you think you'd like to get involved, we give excellent training. We don't let anybody touch our clients until they've completed a fairly rigorous level of training. And we're very patient. We'll stick with you as long as you need to learn, but you've got to learn how to work with our clients. We don't let cowboys into our system, so to speak, even if you are from Texas. My worst relatives all come from Texas, so I've got lots of Texas jokes. You know why Texas doesn't slide into the ocean, don't you? Because Oklahoma sucks so bad. Okay. You can volunteer just by going to our website, hit the volunteer button, complete the form, go through our training, and you'll find our training very good. And many people tell us my personal life is better because of the training. I now relate to my spouse better. I make my kids better. I even know how to treat my employees better. Things like that we've heard. And of course, we need your support, just like every nonprofit. If you think what we're doing is valuable and useful, and you'd like to see more people helped, we would appreciate if you'd go online and maybe look at donating or donating every month. Our monthly donors are what we depend on to make us work. It expands our programs. It gives us international exposure. We are not just we're not just U.S. based. Our leadership is, as you can see, all over the world, and we're in organizations that are outreaching all over. You can't believe how many people find us through the Atheist experience. Any of you find us through the Atheist Experience? I don't know. We're always sending people to the Atheist Experience, but they send us a lot of people as well. And of course, we already mentioned our fall excursion, which is a very relaxing, interesting, educational, fun weekend where Jesus never shows his face once, and you can just, you can swear, you can curse, you can sing songs that aren't religious, and you can share your experience, and you'll hear good talks by experts who are very compassionate and very supportive of our mission. And in May 6th, we're doing our annual fundraiser, so you might want to tune in. We have lots of podcasters like Seth Andrews. I can't remember, I drew a blank, but a lot of different podcasters will be on there with us. So here's what V. LaBianca once said on Atheist Experience when I said, recover from religion. It's like sending up a prayer, but you actually receive an answer. And that's the way we see ourselves. Anyway, thank you so much for your attention today.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for the talk. I know you said one of the common experiences people have leave religion is sometimes they pray for like a while. That was the case with me. I prayed for 2 months, something like that, after I stopped believing. And I found out last night that there is a sex prayer that you have. I was wondering if you could recite that, so I have something to say at night. It's been 9 years, I haven't prayed, so thank you.
We had a good conversation last night. I will not do that today. I don't have time, but I want to answer a question. If you would like to see it, though, go online, go on YouTube, and look up Pastafarian Sex Prayer, Darrel Ray. It will come right up. It will be me speaking to a group of about 1,300 people at the American Atheist Convention, leading a prayer to the Flying Spaghetti Monster. It's unlike any prayer you've ever heard before. I'll just leave it at that. You'll never hear it in a Baptist church, I'll tell you that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question, though. I think it's one of my best works is that prayer. One of my highest achievements in life. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for coming today. Question for you. So you said one of the most common problems you have with people is the loss of life's purpose. And I was curious, what's the top things you say to someone trying to find a new life's purpose after leaving religion?
It's a good question, and one that I will have no answer to, because we do not give answers to people. When somebody chats in with us, we haven't got a clue who they are. They're asking us the question, and they oftentimes say, and they'll ask us, how do you find purpose? And we'll say, it's not about me, it's about you. Let's look at some of the resources we've got here. Here's a whole list of how to create purpose. How about The Purpose-Driven Life by Dan Barker? We'll send them to resources because it is their journey, not ours. It is one of the most important things our volunteers have to learn is keep the focus on them, never on yourself. And we will train and train and train you until you get that in your head. Because it's so easy to say, well, in my story, yeah, and you go off on your own tangent. That's not going to help them. They don't know you. Your advice to them may be totally inappropriate. So my answer to the question is we would never answer that question, would we? We would never answer that question. But before you get off the phone or before you get off the chat line, you will have 50 resources that will help you answer that question yourself. Does that make sense? It's a different approach, very different than most organizations have. Other questions? And by the way, it's a psychologically sound approach. We're actually kind of training you in some of the basics of psychotherapy. That's one of the first skills you learn as a therapist. Keep the focus on the client. Yeah?
Okay, hi. I find that people who've been exposed to a lot of trauma, religious or not, develop like real physiological problems, like pain that has no explanation, etc.
Yes. trauma manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I mean, it can be everything from a speech impediment to paralysis to sexual dysfunction to obsessiveness, obsessive-compulsive behavior. We even have a word for it if it gets too bad within religion. If you're OCD, you might become a victim of scrupulosity, which is a extreme form of religious trauma manifestation. So, yeah. However, I want to be clear. Our agents are not therapists. They're not trained. They're trained to understand what trauma is, but they're not trained to diagnose it. We can't diagnose somebody who's chatting in and we get a 50-word description. That's just not enough. So what we do is if we suspect there's serious stuff going on there, we will refer them to a professional, to the Secular Therapy Project. Now, if they can't find a therapist through our system, which is possible, we don't have any therapists in Russia right now. So you can find our criteria and use that to go to your psychologist and say, would you adhere to these? And if they do, they're probably a safe person to work with. I know that's not quite what your question was, but does that answer your question a little? I just finished the whole tour speaking for an hour and a half every time I stopped in Australia about religious trauma, and I was just touching the surface, an iceberg. There's a lot to it. I mean, think about how complicated PTSD is of soldiers coming back from Afghanistan or somewhere else. Well, this is the same thing. It's just caused by religion rather than by war. So other questions?
We have one final question, but I did want to say, as you were talking about purpose, I was about this close from shouting amen.
Oh. There you go. We say ramen, yes. Go watch my prayer and then you'll understand.
Darrel, thank you so much for the fantastic talk today, obviously. I've seen several of them, and it's always wonderful to see more. I have a question around when you were talking about the stages of religious trauma, right, and how they manifest. It seems to me that people would be cycling back and forth, and that even though maybe you're primarily receiving patients, individuals who have just recently left religion, do you also see a fair number of individuals who may have left religion years ago but are still battling and trying to come to terms with some of their problems?
30%? I bet 30% of our clients that come to us have been out of religion 10 years, and it just now hit them. For whatever reason, something triggered a whole cascade of emotional responses, and they said, where the hell did that come from? And then they understand it came from the religious training. It oftentimes comes when people get divorced. They leave religion, but their spouse is still religious maybe. You continue in the marriage for another 10 years, and finally you get divorced. Well, that break sometimes flips a switch, and we see a whole cascade of issues. I would say maybe as many as 30% of our people have been out of religion for 5 years maybe? Or longer. Oh, we get 70-year-olds coming to us and say, I've been a Jehovah's Witness my whole life, and now I realize it's all bullshit. What do I do? 70 years old. I wasted my whole life on this religion. And that, think of the burden. There's two burdens there. One, I wasted my life. And how many other people's lives did I impact and waste? And there's that guilt. It's a shame that people carry with them. Especially, I see that in ministers. Ministers really carry a lot of shame about what they were doing, but they were doing it with the best of intentions. They were doing the best they had with what they had. And that's a hard thing to get over, that guilt, that shame that comes from that. Thanks. Those are great questions. I appreciate it. I'm happy to talk or interact a little bit afterwards, too. So if you would like a book or we appreciate if you give either $20 cash or a $20 donation to Recover from Religion, and we'll give you a book. I'll sign it for you.
Thank you so much. We are going to have one of our own, Lucana, give an announcement and tell us a joke.
Yeah, some of you will. Can you hear me?
Up a little high for you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Better? Yeah, some of you will remember back in 2014, I did 3 separate talks for Oasis on monarch butterflies. I also made the talks for other secular groups in Houston. This doesn't make me a monarch butterfly expert, it just makes me a monarch butterfly groupie. Consequently, when I was at Sawyer Yards with our friends Marty and Steve Jordan 2 weeks ago, I absolutely could not resist buying this. So maybe during the coffee break, you can come up and take a look at it. It's really, really nice. Okay. I really hesitated to tell you this joke until I realized who our speaker was today, and I'm sure he'll defend me if I get in trouble. A cop stops a car with 2 priests in it. The cop says they were looking for 2 child molesters, and he asked if the priest could help them. The one priest turned to the other and told the cop, "We'll do it." All righty, thank you.
Thank you, Lou. And is the butterfly group, are you called the Fly Society? Are you called the Fly Society? Is that what you're called? The butterfly group? Fly Society is a good one. I'll give you that one for free.
I just wanted to create a little more suspense there. So, don't forget with the coffee cups over here, we used to have styrofoam coffee cups, but that's obviously not very green. So now we have compostable coffee cups. So rather than throwing them away, you can just make a pile over there or give them to me, and I'll make sure they actually get composted. I take them to a commercial composting facility. And if you get a chance, drop a little love in the black hat back there, or we have modern ways of giving also. If you can't give, don't worry about it. We're just happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
We are going to have our musical guest, Chelsea Beach. She's going to perform 2 songs for us.
Dreams of loneliness like a heartbeat drives you listening, and the stillness of remembering what you ate and what you learned and what you ate and what you learned. Oh, come down on me, yeah, comes when it's raining. And dance on me, love you when they're playing. I said, women, they were